Solidarity and shalom, everyone. Good morning to those who are watching live, and hello to those who are watching later. Today is going to be a special one in celebration of the current holiday of Hanukkah. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Hanukkah and what it celebrates, and why I think it can be a lesson that can be learned from modern conditions, especially in terms of national liberation. So, Hanukkah is a story of survival. It's a story of surviving assimilation. It's a story of freeing oneself from foreign oppressors. It is a story of miracles. So, where does the story of Hanukkah come from? Well, it comes from something called the Maccabean Revolt. Now, the Maccabean Revolt is named after a man named Yehuda Maccabee, anglicized as Judah Maccabee, and this revolt was a direct response to Hellenism. Now, for those who don't know, a few decades before, about 100 years before the Maccabean Revolt, a very, very ambitious Greek or Macedonian by the name of Alexander the Great took over all of Greece, all of Asia Minor, Egypt, the Levant, Mesopotamia, Persia, all the way to India. And one of the places that was taken over by Alexander the Great was the Holy Land, was the homeland of the Jews. And for many centuries, there was this creeping phenomenon called Hellenism. And Hellenism is the Greek way of life, Greek philosophy, math, science, beliefs, Platonism, all of these really interesting concepts. And contrary to, what the story of Hanukkah will tell you, the Jews loved Hellenism. They absolutely loved Hellenism. They couldn't get enough of it. And because of this, the Jews started becoming assimilated more and more into the Greek way of life, and it really shaped the way that Jews, lived their everyday life, carried on their traditions. And there was a section amongst Jewish society that was very resistant to Hellenism, that was very fearful of the effects of assimilating, because anyone who knows anything about Judaism knows that Jews have a very specific task from God, and one of them is to preserve the traditions and cultures and laws of the Torah, of the written and oral Torah. And this was starting to become a problem with Hellenism. Hellenism was seeping into their lives, assimilating them, making them lose parts of, their ancient culture. And this is something that Jews battle with, not only back then, but Jews battle with today, because they were not diasporic at this time, but as diasporic people, Jews live amongst so many different cultures and societies and everything. There's always this balancing act that started all the way back during Hellenism, of Alexander the Great, of Jews balancing what it means to be a traditional Jew and to be able to also live and advance and progress with history on the secular side of things. But as the story goes, they took it the Greeks took it too far. The king thereto disposed beforehand, compiled with them, and came upon the Jews with a great army, and took their city by force, and slew a great multitude of those favored by Ptolemy, and sent out his soldiers, so plundered without mercy. He also spoiled the temple, and put a stop to the constant practice of offering daily sacrifices of expiation for 3 years and 6 months. Now that's a quote from the work The Jewish War. Now, this is when things took a turn for towards revolt. Supposedly, the Greek kings came in and defiled the temple and tried to set up offerings to Greek gods like Zeus inside the temple, and this was the final straw for Jews. They said, no, we cannot do this anymore. This is unacceptable. And so the Jews rose up, and they rose up at the back of the Maccabees, and the most famous one being Yehuda Maccabee. But where does the story of the menorah and the oils come from, right? Where does that come from? Well, in Shabbat 21b in the Talmud, here's a little excerpt for you. For when the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oils therein. And when the Hasmonean dynasty prevailed against and defeated them, they made search and found only one cruse of oil lay with the seal of the Kohen Gadol, which was a high priest, but which contained sufficient oil for only one day's days lighting only. Yet a miracle was wrought therein, and they lit the lamp therewith for 8 days. The following year, these days were appointed a festival for the recital of Hallel and Thanksgiving. So we can see here that the story of the oil is that once the Maccabean Revolt started, and the leaders, Yehuda Maccabee, were called the Hasmonean dynasty of Judea, and they prevailed against the Greeks in a battle and took back the temple. And they found that there was only one cruse, I guess, container of oil that still was blessed, and it was only enough for one day to light for the celebration, but for the sacrifices and celebrations, but it miraculously lasted 8 days, and it was an inspiration to all, and ever since then it's been celebrated. But as the story goes, the Yehuda Maccabee and the Maccabees fighting against the Seleucid Greeks and their own Hellenistic Jewish allies. It's very much a civil war. The traditional Jewish side, the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees, they won. They were victorious, and they freed themselves from Greek oppression. Now, that doesn't mean that the Greeks didn't still have influence and sphere of influence on this area until the Romans came, but this was a massive victory, taking back the temple, taking back the Holy Land, and restoring the rights and fighting against this constant a battle of assimilation and oppression with their Greek overlords. and they won. And the Hasmonean dynasty ruled for quite a time after that. And it wasn't until um, it wasn't until um, the invasion of Titus and those folks, whenever they came, the Romans came, that the Jews lost their sovereignty again. And it wasn't long after the Jews lost their sovereignty to the Romans that the Romans actually destroyed the Second Temple. And so the story of the Jewish diaspora begins again. And so that's, if you have to understand most Jewish holidays, you can understand them through, they tried to kill us, they tried to enslave us, they tried to oppress us. We fought back and won and survived and are still surviving. Now let's eat. Now let's eat, drink, celebrate, and be merry. And that's what you can gather out of this story, is that it was a battle for national liberation and for survival against assimilation. And the Jews are not the only people that battle against assimilation. The battle against oppression of their nation. In a much more modern sense, we can look at these things in a much more tangible way, like in Africa, Africans dealing with the assimilation of colonialism and fighting for their national liberation against those colonial masters. And we can see this happening all over the world. And I think that it's important for us to look at history with a Marxist lens, and understand things through class struggle, and understand things through liberation. And I think that we can gain a lot from those sorts of for that sort of thinking. Thank you for everyone who watched this. I hope everyone who celebrates Hanukkah is having a wonderful Hanukkah. I know I've been trying my best to have a good one, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful day, and Baruch Hashem.